Bernard L. Madoff, who had been accused of running the longest, largest, and most international Ponzi scheme in history, got a historic sentence today as well. Federal Judge Denny Chin sentenced him to the maximum 150 years. That's the calculation that federal sentencing guidelines produced. It is obviously a symbolic sentence, but Judge Chin acknowledged that, saying symbolism is important in this case for deterrence, for retribution, and to give a measure of justice to the victims. The victims were in the courtroom. It was an extremely moving period when Judge Chin listened to couple after couple stand and in sometimes shaky and sometimes tear-stopped voices amid sobs and anger as they described the impact that Madoff's crimes have had on them and their families and their grandchildren and their friends. People who have been forced to sell homes, people who have seen money set aside to care for a disabled brother wiped away, people who are going back to work in their elderly years, people who are frightened of their financial future. Judge Chin acknowledged that a long sentence for Bernie Madoff doesn't actually help these victims, but noted that they were placing their trust in the criminal justice system to make sure that Bernie Madoff received the punishment that he deserved. Another rally of victims occurred after the sentencing in Foley Square outside the courthouse here in New York City. These are victims who are protesting the way their losses, the claims that they've filed, are being handled by the government-chartered insurance program called the Securities Investors Protection Corporation, which provides some measure of compensation to people who lose money in brokerage firms. They are arguing that a more generous accounting should be made of their losses using the actual balance that was shown on the final statements they got from Bernie Madoff, even though, as was clear in court today, those statements were lies and had been lies for decades. What happens now? Well, on Friday night, Bernard Madoff relinquished title to any assets that he may have, and his wife, Ruth Madoff, who said in a statement today that she was devastated by the actions of her husband and the impact that they've had on family, friends, and victims around the world. She has relinquished all but $2.5 million in assets towards restitution to the victims. The lawsuits among the victims and between the victims and SIPC are going to go on for some time, and the government emphasized that its criminal investigation is continuing into who else may have had guilty knowledge of this fraud during the many years that it continued. Bernard L. Madoff left the courtroom and returned to the Metropolitan Corrections Center, where he will await assignment to the federal prison where he will spend the rest of his life.